Hello and welcome to the Metapod Podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. Another week of Temporal Forces format. Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise good. I spent a lot of time talking yesterday, and people ask me, how do you not lose your voice? So
For anyone who does not know, Sean streamed one of his local League Cups over on the official Metapod YouTube channel. So if you want to go check out that recap of the event, I was there for a little bit before I had a baseball game and work. But if you want to go check that out, it is on our YouTube channel, the Metapod TCG official YouTube channel. So, but how did it go? I mean, I only caught like the first couple turns of the first round, but how did it go?
it was good. It was good. I mean, yeah, the first two rounds, I will say, like the games were a little rough. You have it sometimes where somebody just dead draws and they just don't have anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the funny thing is, I think it was round one. Uh, the round one match and the finals match are the exact same players.
Oh, is it really?
Yes. And
Mm.
I mean, spoiler alert, but the round one and the finals match are the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
It was
Oh,
crazy.
I was gonna say because I remember round one, kind of what you were saying about how some of the games were weird, but
Yeah.
okay, interesting.
Yeah, it was either round one or round two, but there was a Dialga. Point being, there was like a Dialga in one of the first two rounds.
Let's
And
go.
and I don't know. I mean, again, I will give spoiler alerts, but go watch the finals if you want to see. There was some good decks that were showcased, but Dialga won the whole tournament.
Let's go.
So it was a Dialga V-Star deck against Turbo Hands in the final. Only one
Hmm.
Charizard making it to top four. Two, I think, making it into top eight. But that's pretty low because there was, I think, 9 or 10 Charizards total in Masters. So
How many players did you have?
I think there was 39 Masters, maybe 40, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so like about a third or a fourth of the whole player base being Charizards. Pretty common what we've seen,
Yeah.
what we've talked about in the meta games and stuff like that. So that's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, like 20 some odd percent was Charizard, which is exactly what you saw at the last two big regionals and IC. So yeah,
Hmm.
I mean that's not a surprise. What was a surprise to me too, though, was the Giratina, the rapid change in the preferred Giratina list, and we will talk
Okay.
about a top eight list. But yeah,
Hmm.
Arceus Giratina. Out of the six Giratina lists, five of them were Arceus Giratina, and only one of them was a Lost Zone Giratina. So also, I
Hmm.
think a big shift in the meta in terms of like that deck. People clearly think that deck is the counter to Charizard.
Hmm.
And the Arceus Giratina version currently is the preferred version to counter Charizard as well.
I think it's also interesting because, like, you talk about with the entrance of Turbo Hands
Hmm.
into the metagame, I think inherently hurts the, Lost Box players,
Yeah.
right? So if you're playing Lost Tina, that gives you a disadvantage. But with the Arceus version, pretty hard for an Iron Hands to take extra prizes, right, in the beginning. And then Charizard can't really knock it out in the beginning of the game
Yeah.
for the most part. So I think that's a big reason why you talk about this shift into Arctina, but it's interesting to see that at like the local level, especially.
Yeah. No, it was a big shift. And I would say the one deck that was I said it on stream, but that I think was criminally underplayed in the tournament. There may have only
Hmm.
been one in Masters, was Ancient Box.
Okay.
Just I don't know what and I don't think there were any Roaring Moon with Roaring Moon EX
Hmm.
versions. But so in terms of like regular Ancient Box, all single prizer, it also feels like, yeah, it would have a bad game against Turbo Hands. But the
Hmm.
person who was in seniors, even though it's a small group, he was also playing a lot of Masters. So I think he ended the day at 4-2, I want to say, or maybe 5-1,
Hmm.
as a senior playing against Masters with Ancient Box. And so that's another deck that I'm like, it's a really good deck. It maybe has a bad matchup here and there, but if you know how to pilot it, I was surprised not to see more of that. So
Yeah, I think just like watching ancient box games, a lot of people, think to more of the oh my gosh, what was the black and white deck that I'm thinking of?
don't know.
What? No,
Uh,
it with like battle compressor and the Joltix, um and the Pumpkaboos. I'm gonna lose my mind. I know Justin's probably typing in the comments, but so people like think of that deck as like more like, oh yeah, super easy, just get those in the discard. But I actually think a lot of those decks of like ancient box and stuff where you have to have a specific amount of things in the discard pile are actually like relatively difficult to pilot. Um because of what they like ask for, and you have to like hit specific numbers and hit specific amounts of damage, to try to combo, but also try to maintain the amount of resources to be able to like finish the game. You can't just like
yeah,
discard 80 things too early. So I think that's why a lot of people maybe don't play it, because it is relatively difficult to pilot and also a brand new deck, compared to Charizard, which is not new really. We've seen it in the format for a while, or like Arctina,
yeah,
where turn one, Arceus attach at minimum,
yeah.
Although Arctina is, it does have its nuances and difficulties to play.
Yeah, I mean, but that to your point, the nuances come in the mid game on knowing how to take the prizes you need in every matchup. But
Hmm.
yeah, like the ancient box deck, I would not recommend anybody who's even relatively new to the game start with that, because resource management is the thing that's going to win or lose you that game. Because you're
Yeah.
playing cards like Explorer's Guidance, you have to choose between 6 cards, 2 of them to go into your hand and 4 of them to go into to the discard. There might be scenarios in which you think you're making the right choice, and then 3 turns later you're like, oh, I wish I would have put that into my hand. Why didn't I XYZ?
Hmm.
And a deck like that, it is very fragile, because yeah. So it was interesting. It was a really fun tournament though. Got a lot of good feedback from people on the stream after the fact. So
Hmm.
it was fun hosting it, and there will likely be more League Cups streamed on the Metapod YouTube channel. So if you're a listener and you don't need to necessarily watch, you don't need to change your podcast habits, but if you are interested in watching live streams or even VODs after the fact, give our YouTube a sub if you're interested in that stuff. So yeah.
It is in the description and show notes below if you want to go there right now. But for those of you that are sticking around, or maybe if you paused the episode, went over there, and then came back, welcome back. We do have several bits of news for you. As Sean alluded to, we are going to talk about, some top 8 decks and some really good decks of the Sao Paulo Regionals that happened over in Brazil this weekend. But first, we're going to talk about the registration dates coming up for NAIC. At the time of this recording, the registration for the North American International Championships this year will be happening in just a couple days. There's going to be 2 waves of this. The first wave of player and spectator badges will be divided out into 2 waves. I assume that the first wave is player and the
Nope.
second wave is.
It's all
Oh,
the
no, no,
same.
no.
Yeah, yeah. It's player
Oh,
and
okay. So
spectator, 2 waves.
you'll
Yeah.
get 2 chances to get either a player or spectator badge of your choice. Wave number 1 is going to be happening April 25th, 2024. Remember, write this down, put it in your calendars. April 25th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Pacific time, or 7 p.m. Central time, or 8 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, yeah.
And
All the different time zones. Mountain, we're gonna leave you out of this mountain.
Mountain time, it's going to be at 6 p.m. 6
Yeah.
p.m. Mountain time. Good point. Good point.
Oh Lord.
European players or people in Hawaii, I have no idea. I'm sorry.
Figure it
There's
out.
no,
Use
yeah,
Google.
I'm sorry. And then wave number 2, the second opportunity to be able to get it is going to be April 26th. So the very next day. It's going to be early though. It's going to be 7 a.m. Pacific time. That is a.m., 7 a.m. Pacific time, 8 a.m. Mountain time, 9 a.m. Central time, and 10 a.m. Eastern time. So reminder, April 25th in the evening, 5 p.m. Pacific, April 26th, 7 a.m. Pacific in the morning are the two waves.
One thing I will add is the registration
Mhm.
for this event is new, completely new
Yes.
process. So
Mhm.
I'm actually planning to register. We'll see if I get in. We'll update if and when that happens. But what's new about this one is you actually need to register. It is technically through RK9, but you need to register on the Pokemon.com, like the Pokemon website.
Mhm.
So there's a special portal. You can actually go, if you're listening to this before this happens, you can actually go onto the Pokemon website to the NAIC registration page beforehand, pre-register, make sure that all of your account is all set up. And then when it drops, you'll go through that website to then put your registration in. So while it's being, as far as I understand it, while it's being handled by RK9, the
Mhm.
registration process is going through a new portal on Pokemon.
I think just to make it like cleaner overall and kind of like push out a lot of the random in there, like some botting or anything like that, prevention or whatever, just to make it easier, because a lot of people sometimes have problems with the registration process because it is so in demand,
Yeah.
right? I would imagine that if you're just going for a spectator badge, I don't believe his spectator badges have ever like run out
No.
in events that I've heard of. But you don't want to wait, obviously.
Sure.
Just if you can, go get your spectator badge right away. There is also going to be a Pokemon Center pop-up store at the tournament as usual. They've had this in the past. It's selling exclusive merchandise themed after the event and some of the other stuff from the Pokemon Center website. Those times are going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the day before, and then the 3 days of the event. So there's times on there. The registration for that is going to be at a different time, not going to be the times that we talked about earlier with the player and spectator badge registration. One of the things that PokeBeach notes, at least on their article, which if you want the times that the Pokemon Center is going to be open, the pop-up store, you can check that there. To get a reservation in the Pokemon Center, you do not need a badge from NAIC to attend in there, which in my opinion is interesting because I think last year when I went, you had to have a player or spectator badge
Hmm.
to be able to get into the Pokemon Center, but it wasn't in the play area because they like punched a hole in your ticket,
Oh, interesting.
or they punched a hole in your badge. My badge is over there, so I didn't think to grab it, but um yeah, my badge has a punch in it
Oh,
from
interesting. Weird.
it. Yeah, so I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that this is different. This system of letting people in. So be sure to eye up the news and stuff like that, and we'll try to tell you when we find out when the Pokemon Center reservations will open up, because it sounds like to me that more people are going to be able to try to get in because you don't need a badge to attend.
Yeah. And I will
And
also
I know
say,
they're hot items.
yeah, I'm just going to pull up on the screen the welcome kit. If you
Hmm.
are planning to attend, like, in previous years, they always have, the different ICs have a theming, if you will.
Hmm.
And this year's no different. This year's theming is really, what's the latest set? Temporal Forces. What kind of cards are in the latest set? It's all about future and ancient Pokemon. So this one, it seems like the star of the show is really Roaring Moon,
Hmm.
with maybe Iron Valiant being, the side character, and then the others being like, around, right?
Hmm.
So if you like Roaring Moon, you're gonna love all of this welcome kit and what it features for the playmat, for the hat, for sleeves, etc. So
Just a
Interesting.
reminder that the welcome kit is only for competitors. So
Yes, that's true.
if you get a spectator badge, you won't be getting this welcome kit. It is exclusive to competitors. So if that influences your decision at all, then by all means. I do know that they do have like the event exclusive stuff will be at the Pokemon Center. So it won't exactly be like this, but it'll be a similar
Similar.
theme. Like I have a double deck box from NAIC. I don't have it on me, so I can't show it, but I have a double deck box of NAIC last year. I use it all the time. It's really good. And I'd imagine that they'll have stuff like that as well for anybody who maybe remembers that merch.
Nice. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's all the details for NAIC. We wanted to just make sure y'all came out of this podcast. If you're an early listener of the pod when it comes out, you'll have all the deets, and hopefully you don't miss out on registration if you're looking to go.
Yes, and if you are listening to this late after the registration, well, this is your notice to start listening to us earlier. I'm just
Oh
kidding.
my. Yeah, I mean you could probably still get a spectator badge if you really want to go. Because I will say, as Jake has also said before, side events are awesome. Don't
Yes.
discount like a spectator badge, side events, it's still fun. So
Yeah, I mean, NAIC is a great event and there's a ton of things to do. And I mean, in my opinion, I've been to NAIC multiple times. I've never been to New Orleans though.
mm,
New Orleans? New
yep.
Orleans?
Nolans.
Um, how do you pronounce it? I
I
don't
don't know.
know. But I've never been at this venue, but at least when it was in Columbus, I had a great time both times, and I thought it got better both times. So definitely something to look out for.
Yep. But Jake, I gave you a little preview, and I also say I gave people who watched the live stream yesterday a longer preview of my thoughts. But I just wanted to talk about one of the new A Spec cards that's coming out in Twilight Masquerade.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to talk about this with you, Jake. I don't know if you've been keeping up with the news, but are you familiar, Jake, with what Secret Box does?
Um, I have heard about it, but also no, because I'm not fully fluent in Japanese and I can't find the actual
Well, I
translation.
know.
Could you
I
just
can
send me
tell
the
you.
picture of the card? Yeah, yeah.
You
So
know, I
tell me
can
it.
tell you the translation. So you can only play this card. So this is an A spec for all of you listening. Can't
Yes.
necessarily see. It's an A spec coming out in the next set. It says you can only play this card if you discard 3 other cards from your hand. So it's Ultra Ball is discarding 2. This is one more than that. This is actually quite a lot to discard in order to play the card. And it's an A spec, right? So you would hope that you get a decent effect for getting rid of all those cards. Well, what you get is you can search your deck for an item card, a tool card, a supporter card, and a stadium card.
Hmm.
Um, Jake, uh, do you remember when we talked about on the pod probably several times? We debated. We were like, are they going to reprint computer search, right? And
Hmm.
my opinion at the time was until Forest Sealstone and Arceus V-Star rotated, I didn't think they would reprint computer search because it just felt redundant to what's already available in the format, right? Like there are cards that effectively allow you to do a computer research effect with like small caveats, right?
Yeah.
So I just felt like it would not be healthy for the game, wouldn't be necessary. I want to know though, before I get into my rant, what is your thoughts? Just hearing that, just hearing what I say, I want to know what you think about this card.
So this is definitely themed after the original A-Spec computer search. For anyone who doesn't know, computer search, discard 2 cards from your hand, search your deck for a card, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck. So this is a successor to it. Computer search, as we've mentioned, insanely broken card,
Mm-hmm.
crazy good card. Definitely would be played in a lot of decks if reinserted into the format. And so this is a quote unquote healthier version of the card, in my opinion. I think it's healthier.
Okay, keep
I
going. I don't want to.
let me finish. Let me
I
finish
will
because
not show my face.
because I don't think that this card is very good. Especially in comparison to computer search. Yes, it's good in the fact that it gets you an item card, a tool card, a supporter card, a stadium card. You know, you get 4 cards for the price of
Of 4.
4,
Yeah.
right? You discarding 3 cards and playing another card, which is the mystery box. You're getting a fair 4 for 4 putting in your hand. Actually, maybe this card isn't that bad. No,
So
because it doesn't end your turn, right?
nope, it does not.
I think you got a supporter card, an item card, a tool card, and a stadium card. I think this card's not that bad.
Okay,
I don't think this card's that bad. It has a high sacrifice,
it does.
but it has a pretty good reward. At first, I was gonna say the reason that my like thoughts almost sound like they're pivoting is because I thought this card ended your turn, and so
Mm.
I was prepared to be like, this card sucks, but it's not that bad. I think it's better than I think it's healthier than computer search because it takes more, because it's one of those cards that says like you can only do this if you discard 3 cards from your hand, right? If you have 3 cards in your hand and one of them is mystery box, you cannot play that card.
True.
Similar to the effect of Ultra Ball, like you literally have to discard the cards from your hand. So having 4 cards in your hand is a lot, in my opinion. It's not impossible, but I think this card is more fair, and the fact that it gosh, this is a very interesting card.
Do you want me to paint a picture, a
Sure,
scenario?
go
So
for it.
I'm going to paint a scenario, and look, everybody can say, "Well, what are the odds that you have X, Y, Z, and blah blah blah?" And I'm like, look, decks have lots of scenarios that happen that you think are kind of wild, and I don't think this one is that outrageous. So
Mhm.
imagine a scenario where you're playing Charizard, right?
Okay.
And you've ended your first turn, and you have a Bibarel, a Pidgey, a Charmander, and you threw a Rotom down, a Rotom V, and then at the end of
Mhm.
your turn you draw 3 cards, right? So the odds that you are going to have a minimum of 4 cards in your hand when you start your next turn are very high, I would say.
Yeah.
You might have more than 4 cards, depending on the resources you needed to play. So, okay, you have all of that, and you start your next turn. Now, the scenario that I offer you is you discard 3 cards that maybe you don't need as much from your hand. And I'm assuming that you don't have any other cards in your hand that are of value, because you might have other cards
Mhm.
that you don't need to go search. But you discard those cards from your hand, play this card, and the cards that you go get are Collapse Stadium, Forest Sealstone, Rare Candy, and or Ultra Ball. You could get Ultra Ball if you have extra cards in your hand. And what's that? And Cypher Maniac's code breaking. And
Yeah.
I think that this actually makes Charizard a Cypher Maniac deck. And the reason being, so you get all those things, and then you can say you get the Ultra Ball instead of the Rare Candy. You Ultra Ball the other 2 cards in your hand that you maybe didn't need are. You go get Bibarel. You attach the Forest Sealstone. You use the Forest Sealstone. You play the Collapse Stadium, perhaps. You get rid of the Rotom after you've used the Forest Sealstone. And then you Cypher Maniac, putting any 2 cards on top, which is better than a computer search, because guess what you also got with this card? The Bibarel. Then you Bibarel the 2 cards that you wanted. You've already gotten the Rare Candy. So you probably go grab a Pidgeot and a Rare Candy. You Rare Candy into Pidgeot, Pidgeot for a Charizard, take the Rare Candy you got with this into Charizard. This is literally, it feels like a 1-card combo. And that's just one scenario that I am painting where all you have asked of the player is to start the game with one of those 3 basics of Bidoof, Charmander, or Pidgey. Start with one of those going
Mhm.
first. Play a Buddy Buddy Poffin on turn 1 and a Nest Ball or an Ultra Ball for the Rotom. That's all you are asking of your player turn 1 going first. And then turn 2, you do have to have this card, right? Like, it's not guaranteed. But
Yeah.
that is not, I mean, how many people have had Prime Catcher in their opening hand or Maximum Bell? It happens, right? So I'm painting that picture because I'm like, I personally think that this card, I I think they should never have made this card. I think this is much better than computer
Ooh.
search. I think it's much better.
Ooh.
And I say that because it's much better in the context of this format. We have Bibarel, we have Cypher Maniac, we have Forest Sealstone. You have all of these cards that this card basically enables you to search your deck for 3 additional cards if you've built your deck around it.
I do like your combo. I think your combo, to your point, is like it's a really, really good combo to be able to ignite. I agree with your reasoning on like you do have to have this card,
Sure.
right, to be able to have it. And the thing that I also want to point out about like you have to have this card, like it's a one of card in your deck in 60 cards.
That's searchable by
You
Arvin
also, well, you can't play Arvin and
on the
play
same
your
turn.
Cypher. Yeah, you can't
Yeah,
play them
you
on the
can't do
same
those 2.
turn. So it's, and plus, like, if you do play Arvin, right, like you sit on this card and you combo or whatever, then we have a much heavier format of like Judge and Iono, right, to be played, because there's no way that I'm going to let you sit with this card in your hand, right? And if you play it, great. I'm just going to shuffle your hand back in your deck or put it all of these important, beautiful cards at the bottom of your deck. So then, you can't utilize them next turn or any of the ones that you haven't already. So it's like, and with the Ultra Ball as well, like you're discarding, that's 7 cards between discarding the 4 cards
And then
or
the Ultra Ball.
using the 4 cards from the mysterious box,
Secret box. Yeah.
secret box, and then discarding or using another 3 cards off the Ultra Ball. So I do like your combo is really, really good that you mentioned, and I don't think it is out of the ordinary. I think that's a perfectly fair combo to say, but I think that's also a lot to ask for. Not saying that it won't ever
Yeah.
happen.
I'm just thinking, like, if you ended your turn, it's like Charizard, you play a
Mm-hmm.
couple of cards, right? And then you end your turn. You're going to start your turn with 7 cards. You play a
Mm-hmm.
Buddy Possum, you're down to 6. You Ultra Ball 2 cards away, you're down to 3. And then you Rotom back up to 6, and you draw for turn. That's 7. That's exactly the amount of cards you need for that combo.
I
It's
just
not that crazy.
it's not that crazy. It's not. It's truly not. And I'm not trying to say that like the combo is bad or unreasonable. I don't know if it'll happen as often as we think.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like maybe the format has changed so much and I'm just like slightly out of touch on it, but I feel like that's a lot to ask for. Um
I
yeah,
mean,
I think this card is good. I don't think it's bad, but I definitely don't think it's better than computer search.
yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I think computer search, because computer search is so generic and good at the same time, like
hmm
it in theory is just inherently good in any deck, right? Like, okay, go get any card you want. Why do so many decks play a one of Luminion or Rotom or whatever just to play Forest Sealstone? Because in effect, to get one card out of your deck is good. It's always a good effect. But
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I just my opinion with this card is, and I think about it from the perspective of the game. I think this card adds a lot of potential consistency, because I just gave you one scenario, but like there are other scenarios that I think this
I'm
card would
sure it
be
works with a
equally good
lot of
in.
other things.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I think it just allowing you to get any stadium, like, even though they don't seem to be as good right now, I think Lost City is an underplayed stadium. I think that stadium absolutely destroys decks. Like Chen Pao, if you play a
We'll
Lost Stadium
actually
on the
talk
right
about
turn,
a Lost City deck
yes.
later.
But like, I think that card is underplayed. Collapse Stadium is a great card to remove 2 prizes from your opponent.
hmm
And I'm sure there will be others in the future for the next 2.5 years after this card is printed.
hmm
And then I just, until Forest Sealstone rotates, this also effectively acts as a computer search, because you can get Forest Sealstone and then use Forest Sealstone to get any card. So That's why I say in this format, with the cards that we also have in format, like with Bibarel, Cypher Maniac, and Forest Sealstone all existing at the same time, or heck, you could play this in an RCSV Star deck, and you could go get, I don't know what tool you would need, but you could go get a tool. Maybe it's a choice belt or a defiance band. But you go get whatever tool you need out, and then you can Arceus for 2 more cards at the same time. And for me, this card adds a level of consistency that becomes unhealthy in the format. And
Okay.
that's ultimately my problem. I've been listening to some interesting documentaries, and not documentary, interviews with people like Richard Garfield, like other card game designers, right? And they
Yeah.
do talk about the fact that, look, if you want to play a game where there is 100% or as little randomness as possible, then you'll play either a game. Technically, a no randomness game is, what is the answer to 1+1? It's 2. There's no randomness to that game. There is an answer.
Hmm.
Games that have some randomness that you don't think are like chess. It's random because there might be an optimal play, but you can't know what your opponent's going to do. So
Yeah,
technically,
like
it's not
there's like a most likely move that your opponent's going to make,
right.
but you can't fully predict perfectly, human thought.
Right. But everything is fully known. The entire game state is known, right? Like, and
Hmm.
you have access to make any move that you want that's a legal move on any given turn. And I
And
think,
any move that you make is a public possibility that
sure,
anybody could
exactly.
think of. Yeah.
And that's why, like, the further away you get from that, the more random you get, all the way up to, like, casinos, like roulette tables, right? The most random.
Hmm.
But, and card games, I think, do need to straddle a line of some level of consistency, some level of randomness. Like, we've all played games where you just brick and it feels horrible, or you play games where you Iono and your opponent just has the exact card they need to get out of that scenario, right?
Yeah.
But my fear is this card encourages people to play Bibarel, which is a great card. Do not get me wrong. I don't
We
think that
love the barrel
we
in
love
this
Bibarel,
in this podcast.
but I think this card actively encourages people to play Bibarel to refill their hand. It may encourage people to play the Bibarel Cypher Maniac combo, which guarantees more cards of exactly what you want out of your deck. And that little combination there, I don't think people think about it, but when you play against decks like Chen Pao or even Charizard now, the ability to take a knockout, a meaningful prize trade knockout, and also Iono or Roxane your opponent into a hand that gives you the chance to come back, the barrel is a huge negating factor to that. Like, when I've played Chen Pao decks, half the time when I play against my friends, I actually target down Bibarel because I know if I can Iono them on the right turn and they don't have a way to draw out of it, then that's how I'm going to win this game. Targeting down the Chen Pao, it's almost like bait, right? Like, they're probably going to be able to
Hmm.
recycle the Chen Paos because they're going to draw 8, 10, 12 cards every turn, right? And I think, in my opinion, this card encourages a format that negates the cards they have printed for comeback mechanics. It negates the new reset stamp A-Spec. It negates Iono. It negates Roxanne because it encourages you to build your deck in such a way that those mechanics don't work anymore. And that ultimately, that's why I'm like, I think this, in the context of the format, is an unhealthy card. But I just wanted to give my little rant. But yeah, look, and it may be that nobody plays the card and it's trash, but I would be surprised.
I will also say computer search, or actually, let me do this. This A spec is going to be a part of Twilight or Transformation Mask in Japan, which should be in English, Twilight Masquerade, which should release in
In 3 weeks.
late May, 2024. So we're supposedly getting that card around that time. But I think we still don't have like a set list, so
True.
it's not guaranteed. But that is the assumption, is that it's coming. It's interesting that you say like the reset stamp, um, like the new A spec reset stamp, because I don't know. Like, I mean, this is also a one card. It's
Hmm.
not a it's not a card that can be played, like it's not base set, right? Where
Yeah, true.
you had 4 computer searches in your deck, that could be played at any point.
Yeah, that was wild.
This is a one-time combo. This is a 1 card.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's really good, don't get me wrong, or it's good. And it but I don't think it's an end all be all or like, toxic for the game or anything like that, or just like negates things necessarily. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's the overlap between like this card and also Bibarel in format? Like, wouldn't Bibarel rotate in the next rotation?
Yes, so there's going to be
So,
like
well, I guess
a
it's almost like a year.
yeah, there's almost a year of a format where they're both in format, and almost a year where you also have Forest Sealstone, which is one of the
Hmm.
tools you can grab with this card.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm like, I don't I think I agree with you. In expanded, this card might be terrible. Once those other cards rotate,
Expanded. Who's thinking
right?
about
Exactly.
expanded? Not the Pokemon Company.
I think once Bibarel and Forest Sealstone rotate, again, this card might be bad after that, right?
Hmm.
Because it is, to your point, it is a lot of resources. And unless you have a combination of cards that are you actually want, because like some decks might be like, well, I don't care about stadiums or I don't care about tools. And then you're kind of like, why would I play this card instead of Prime Catcher? That's totally fair. But I think that currently the upside is so high for most decks. I look, I'll give them props. They printed a card that makes me question whether or not I should play Prime Catcher in most of my decks. And I'm
Yeah.
like, hey,
You know what?
impressive. You've managed to top that, maybe. So
I will say also, computer search lived in an era that propagation execute was around.
yeah, that is worse.
So effectively, computer search was really only like discard 1 card.
That's true.
And I've played many games of expanded or like that black and white format. I can tell you how many times I computer searched away 2 propagation executes for basically playing a computer search for free. So
Love that.
I definitely, I think it's hard to compare the 2 cards also, just because I think they live in such 2 vastly different formats.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting.
yeah,
I mean,
just
I
thinking
will
about it
say,
more.
just play leftover Snorlack. It's propagation execute at home.
Yeah, look at that. We've got the combos for you right here on the
Oh Lord.
Metapod, but we've also got pretty good deck lists. The Sao Paulo Regionals in Brazil were this past weekend, over 1,100 players. Sean, the top 8. We know the archetypes, but we only have a little bit of the list at this point in the podcast. But I think you can kind of gauge
Yeah,
what a
the
lot of
format.
these, yeah, we can kind of gauge what a lot of these cards are, because we've had other tournaments in the last couple of weeks that we've talked about. Pedro Pertusi ended up winning with Charizard Pidgeot. Now, I will say, in this Charizard Pidgeot, we don't have an exact list, but I took a couple notes based from like the match that I skimmed through in the finals before we went into this podcast. For his ace spec of choice, he chose Hero's Cape. I think Prime
Hmm.
Catcher has been the most popular of all of them. And so going into Hero's Cape for the extra HP, Sean.
I guess if you expect to see a lot of Giratina, the Hero's Cape can be very annoying, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're expecting maybe Prime Catcher or maybe Maximum Belt, and then the Hero's Cape is kind of always been the third option. So all of a sudden, the math isn't mathing for Arctina, and you're like, oh, I can't knock it out. Um, I think even I don't think you can even knock it out with the Iron Leaves, because the Hero's
Oh,
Cape puts
yeah.
you at 430 and the Iron Leaves only does 180, so you're just doing 360. So yeah, the math doesn't math with Hero's Cape in that matchup. So maybe that's what their thought process there is.
It also just makes the math a lot harder for several other decks in the format that do 1-hit KOs, including Chin Pao. I think the Ancient Box decks can technically reach the number, not
Just
super
barely.
likely, but yeah, but still able to. Now it's like out of the question. Like a 430 HP Charizard, like that deck at least is not knocking it out in one shot. The Chin Pao, I think, technically still can, but it's
It's a lot.
actually, can they? I'd have to think about what their energy count actually
They
is.
can. They usually play 8 water and 1 lightning, so 8 water would be 480 damage. So
Yeah,
they
so they'd
barely.
effectively have to they would actually have to have every single energy,
Yeah,
because one energy less would be 420 damage, which is not a
not
knockout.
enough.
So in my opinion, I think Hero's Cape is a really cool addition to this deck. We can assume with the Bibarel, the Defiance Band, the Collapse Stadium, that it's for the most part this build of controls art that we've seen, but only time will tell until Pedro actually produces the deck list. But the Hero's Cape is just the biggest thing that I wanted to mention because it's such, it's a change
Yeah.
in the deck list. Ended up beating Nicholas Galaz with a Lost Box. I know this Lost Box deck had Roaring Moon EX, so playing some dark energies, but also an Iron Hands
Hmm.
EX,
Yeah.
because it played that and a Lightning energy. So I think we can assume also that there may be a Raikou in this list.
Yeah.
If it's playing lightning energies and iron hands, that's something we've seen in the past. And I still think that Raikou is actually a decent attacker, right?
Yeah.
Because of everybody's bench is still like relatively full. You're still hitting a lot of damage, especially with Luminions on the field, with Rotoms on the field, right? Just easy two prize exchange
And
that you can do.
I'll also say Rotom, not Rotom, Raikou, very good against Pidgeot EX. So if you're in that
Yeah,
Charizard matchup, there's 2 prizes there. There's 2 prizes from Roaring Moon EX, and then you can just finish it off with the Iron Hands on a Bibarel or something, right?
yeah, whatever you choose. So Pedro Pertusi ended up winning that one, the Brazilian. Very, very good player for anyone who does not know. So not super surprising in that aspect. In the top 8 as well, there were 2 other Charizard Pidgeot decks, probably around the same as Pedro. If I had to take a guess, maybe some prime catchers in there instead of Hero's Cape, but fifth place overall was a Lost Box Garatina deck. Sixth place was a Gardevoir. So again, with my thing, I think like there's usually one top 8 Gardevoir
Yeah.
in some stuff because players just love it. Seventh place was Arceus Garatina, and then eighth place was a Lugia
Okay, interesting.
Archeops. So, Sean, do you want to go over a Gardevoir list first because there was technically a Gardevoir in top 8, or do you want to go over Arctina first?
Let's go over Gardevoir. I think it's a deck that we haven't really covered much, if at
Mm-hmm.
all, in the new format. And I think we probably talked about it a little bit, but seeing a deck list for people who just love Gardevoir from previous sets and was like, how do I even build this?
Mm-hmm.
So,
So, just for full transparency, this is not the sixth place Gardevoir list that Giovanni Peragayo, hopefully I pronounced that right, probably didn't. This is not his exact deck list. This is actually Gabriel Fernandez's deck list that won seniors in the tournament. So Gardevoir ended up winning seniors. Gabriel, for anyone who does not remember, seniors world champion with Lugia last year. So this Gardevoir list has been popularized the last couple of weeks to some people's surprise. Playing the Refinement, Curlia is 2 Gardevoirs. Playing a Fluttermane, we saw Fluttermane in the previous weeks be very, very good in the format. So continuing to play that one of also playing
Mimikyu.
playing the what?
The Mimikyu as well.
Yeah, the Mimikyu in there, and also one Scream Tail with 2 Drifloons.
Hmm.
Sean. So really emphasizing with the Hero's Cape, the Bravery Charm, right? And
Luxurious Cape.
Luxurious Cape. I was going to say, I don't know what that other card
Yeah.
is. I can't read Portuguese. So those 3 cards right there really emphasizing, the boost of health, and then also with these other Pokemon producing the damage in this.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's interesting in terms of the supporter. The one thing I will say, the big change in Gardevoir, it's a very Arven heavy line. So
Hmm.
it seems like prioritizing very much, just trying to get that TM evolution online going second. That way you can get two Curlias out, preferably
Hmm.
as quickly as possible. Just because, yeah, you don't have Mirage Step anymore. You're not playing things like Fog Crystal or any of that. But once you get past that initial early setup phase, it's really about disruption, right? Four
Yeah.
Ionos and a copy of Airy and the Professor Turo as well, which is an interesting additional, you know, supporter there. Either to get you out of the active because there are no switch cards in this
Hmm.
deck, so there is the fear maybe of something getting trapped in the active, or just picking up a damaged Gardevoir EX, or just taking a Gardevoir EX off the board. If your opponent needs two prizes and you've already put all the energy on board, you can pick up that Gardevoir EX, play that Ralts back down, and then just be like, okay, well, I'm not going to give you a two prizer. Go.
Hmm.
So,
Just really, really good options for this deck that can so aggressively draw. So the setup is so important. Two DM evolutions are in the deck,
yep.
also to note. Um, there is also the Collapse Stadium. There's a copy of Collapse Stadium in this deck, and playing a couple different options, two earthen vessels to be able to find your energies. That's one of the things sometimes that Gardevoir struggles with. I feel like that I've watched and seen as of late is sometimes you just can't find your energies to either put in the discard pile or attach to your Pokemon for the various reasons that you would. So Earthen Vessel just really good at not only putting an energy in the discard pile potentially, but also just grabbing some to be able to play off like your Ultra Ball or things of that nature. So
Yep.
really, really cool list in my opinion, or synergize well with your Radiant Greninja.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, look,
Mhm.
if you're looking to play Gardevoir, a really good template for you to base your deck off of.
I think also there was just released the other day. I think this is officially out now. I've seen some people get it on Twitter. The Gardevoir EX League Battle Deck. Do you
Oh,
remember us
okay.
talking about that, Sean?
Yeah, I do. I do. It was a while back.
Yeah, this actually launched on Friday last week. So this is officially out. If you want to be able to get some Gardevoir EXs, a Radiant Greninja, stuff like that. A lot of important pieces in this deck. You can get the Gardevoir EX League Battle deck. I don't have the exact deck list, but I think also this does come with Drifloons and a Bravery Charm as well. I'm quickly reading the description on the Pokemon press release site about the product. So,
Nice.
really, really good again if you want to be able to build this deck right away.
Next deck I know that you sent me, Jake, and we talked about it a little
Mhm.
bit earlier, this sort of shift for Arceus Giratina instead of the Lost Zone version. Yeah, we could talk about it. There's an Arctina list that I have up on screen. Whose list
Mhm.
was this? Was it somebody from the top
This
eight?
is Lucas. Yeah, Lucas Mathis's top 8 Arceus Giratina list, 7th place overall.
Okay. So the one thing that I'll point out immediately for the listeners is
Mhm.
it's a 4-4 line of Arceus. So just really prioritizing I will not miss Arceus turn one. I refuse. And that's fair.
Hopefully.
The whole deck kind of revolves around getting Arceus online, and preferably going second. Um,
Mhm.
2-2 Giratina, and then a 3-3 Bibarel line. So just sort of also stating, hey, my whole engine is Bibarel. That's my draw, right?
Mhm.
I'm gonna boss, I'm gonna disrupt you with Judge and Iono. But otherwise, my main draw support is going to be Bibarel. And then one Squavit to help that engine run, and an Iron Leaves to help out with the Charizard match. But Jake, you mentioned something earlier that maybe is a shift in how this deck operates. What's catching your eye about this deck in particular?
This deck specifically is playing 3 Lost Cities. We kind of mentioned Lost City in this format earlier. Lost City becoming prevalent in this deck once again. again is a great way to, especially when you boss up these important Pokemon, right? Or maybe just take knockouts in general, not being able to recycle them and put them back in from like Super Rod and stuff like that. Like Chin Pao is one of
Yeah.
the things that I think of. The Ancient Box deck, right?
Yes.
Putting those important Pokemon that they're attacking with into the Lost Zone so they potentially have no other good attackers left in the game, or maybe just getting, you know,
Charizard
some other
sometimes.
Pokemon off the field. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Charizard sometime. Just not preventing your opponent, punishing your opponent from having minimal splits
Yeah.
in their decks, very tight splits, to not be able to utilize off of Super Rod. So just really, really cool overall to kind of see that shift again, especially with Path to the Peak gone, right? There's not really like a stadium option anymore for Arceus Garatina specifically that it totally really loves, has to play. So I think that Lost City is a great option if you would like to play that.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting here the opting for the prime catcher as the primary A spec in at least this list,
Mhm,
over something like the maximum belt, because as we've talked about before, normally this deck, if you're up against Charizard, you have the Iron Leaves, so that's usually at least one two prize knockout, and you can boss up a Pidgeot with Giratina V Star for another two prizes. But I know a lot of people who are playing this were opting for a the maximum belt because that is a third knockout on a Charizard. Uh,
mhm.
but I guess if Charizard plays Hero's Cape, then you're probably happy you don't play the maximum belt. So yeah, it's just interesting to sort of see, at least with this list saying, hey, maybe I'd rather go after, say they play a Rotom turn one and they go second,
Mhm.
and if I can knock out that Rotom early or whatever, that might be something I'd rather prioritize, a Rotom or a Luminion for that third two prize option. So just interesting thoughts
I
there.
I think Prime Catcher is just really important as well. Like I like the shift into Prime Catcher,
Hmm.
mostly because especially for something like Arceus Giratina, right? This Arceus list is not playing like a choice belt or any damage modifier per se, but they're more than likely going to have a double turbo on it, right? So the maximum output is something like
180.
180.
Yeah,
So you're not going to be able to knock out a
that's
Rotom
true.
right away. So being able to chase something like Luminion is really, really good. And then also just for Garatina, right? You're only able to use the Star Requiem one time, and that's only if you didn't use Arceus V Star's V Star
Well,
power.
yeah, I mean, I even think, I don't even know how possible it is for this deck to use Star Record. You need 10 in the Lost Zone.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
So your max damage that you're doing is 280. So with the jump in Charizards in format that are always going to have a Pidgeot V or Pidgeot EX, you're going to want to chase that, right? If
Yeah.
you really want to keep up with the prize exchange and stuff like that, especially because you do have that Iron Leaves in there. So it's like, it's not, in my opinion, very wild to be chasing a little bit more because there are 4 bosses orders
Yeah.
in this list. There's a lot of potential for chasing. And plus, with, I think we talked about this previously in a week, like play Lost Vacuum if you're
Yeah.
worried about like Hero's Cape or Maximum Belt or things like that. Prime Catcher allows you at least to get guaranteed value off of that A spec. Whereas, Hero's Cape or something, you may think it gives you value until they lost vacuum it, and then you're like, well, I can't use this anymore.
Yeah.
So I do like kind of that shift in this deck, and I think it's in an interesting position to see like Arctina constantly wave in and out of the format. We'll see though, because I feel like in the beginning of formats, we've seen Arctina, and then as the format continues, we've seen less Arctina.
Hmm.
Um, so we'll see how long it stays in the format. The format is still relatively fresh and new. Just
Well,
a
it's,
couple events,
I
but
was gonna say
um,
we'll have a few more events actually. We'll have LA and we're gonna have Indianapolis. So yeah,
mhm,
but it is a short format too. So by the time by the time the format starts to feel like figured out, we'll be in pre-release for Twilight Masquerade in 3 weeks, which is crazy.
Exactly. But there's one other deck that we wanted to talk about. There was Espathra EX. Now, I personally love stuff like Espathra EX. I think we mentioned it on the podcast about
Yep.
how much we liked it, and hope that it would do well. I think this is 36th overall, was the highest placing Espathra. I think this list specifically is Vinny Fernandez's list
Okay.
that he played. I think he got top 64 or somewhere around there. So, I mean, top 100 out of 1,000 players is still
Great.
very respectable, um, in my opinion, in these large events. Espathra EX, if you do not remember, stage 1, grass type, 260 HP Terra Pokemon, has the ability Dazzling Gaze. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, attacks used by your opponent's active Pokemon cost 1 colorless energy more. And then in combination with its 1 psychic energy attack, 30 plus damage, this attack does 30 more damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. That ability synergizes really well with the attack. And this list specifically, Sean, really, really cool, using the Zatu engine, right? Very reminiscent of the Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX days, where you're adding an energy to a Pokemon and then drawing 2 cards off of it. So an inherent kind of draw engine, but also playing Pokemon League headquarters. Sean, do
Yeah.
you remember what this stadium is?
Oh, it's been in my Charizard for 3 months, Jake.
Oh, wait, really?
Yes, yes. And
Oh, okay.
everyone when I play them, they do this. What? And then they
What,
go,
Sean?
and then later on, they're like, yeah, that's the reason I lost the game, is this stupid stadium.
Sean, tell the viewers, then the listeners, what Pokemon League headquarters does.
Attacks of basic Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, cost 1 colorless more.
So, effectively, this card for Ancient Box decks, for Chin Pao decks, for a lot of like Lost Box decks, for the future Turbo deck,
Yep.
right? Costing an energy more to be able to use this attack. Also has really interesting synergy in the Charizard EX matchup when they play Radiant Charizard.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
to be able to make the attack cost 2 more on your
Oh my gosh.
Espathra EX. So really, really cool. I know that at least one of the Espathra games, one of Vinny's games was streamed, and this deck was really, really cool to be able to see in action. Also playing a 3 split of the Shuppet Banette line, 3 basic little Shuppets and 2 Shuppet EXs to be able to, or I'm sorry, Banette EXs to use the item lock, but also one of the Lost Zone Banettes, the one that allows you, if you put the Banette in the Lost Zone and all cards attached, and discarding all cards attached to it, you may put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand. So effectively, like, getting more consistency, playing the 4 researches, 2 bosses, and 4 Ionos.
This is a cool list. I will say, look, it's probably a bad idea. I would love to see somebody play this list and play the new Salvatore supporter with it. For those of you who don't
Oh
remember,
yeah, that's right.
Salvatore has the effect of, you search your deck for an evolution Pokemon that evolves from one of your Pokemon, put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it, and you can use it if you on your first turn. You can't use it. Well, actually, yeah, you can't use it if you go first, but you can use it on your first turn to evolve a
Mhm.
Pokemon that came into play that turn. And the reason I like that, it's really cheeky. It's probably not great, but think about, like, if Arceus is really popular, Arceus can accelerate a ton of energy, right? And that can be probably annoying for this deck. And they're all evolution, so your Pokemon League headquarters doesn't do much. But with Espathra, if your opponent goes first and say they attach just a regular energy, use Salvatore, and all of a sudden, oh no, double turbo doesn't get you there. Oh, you need
Mhm.
3 energy. Oh, dang. Oh, dang. Going second, apparently. I don't know. It's just, I thought about that. I was like, that would be pretty sneaky against certain decks.
It's a really funny combo, and another thing that I think is really kind of cheeky about this deck is your Radiant of choice, Sean, Radiant Alakazam, to
Yeah.
be able to move damage counters around the field. And I think it's really interesting, especially in some of the matchups. So you talk about like Bennett, right? I think that this is interesting and used in a combination with Bennett to be able to play, because Bennett has to put damage on the field when you're item locking, right?
Hmm.
And
I think
so
it does
being
30.
able, yeah, so being able, maybe if there's a little Pokemon on the field, maybe you're playing like a Lost Box deck, right? Being able to move those damage counters to other Pokemon to be able to continuously prevent your opponent from really playing the game, but not taking knockouts at
Yeah.
that point, until, you're ready and, you just start taking them kind of left and right.
Or just
With,
or just taking knockouts not on the active, right? You just move it every turn,
yeah,
knock out all their
exactly.
bench. I think against Charizard, that Bennett is nasty because if they can't if they can't play any items, that means they can't rare candy.
They have
And
to play the Charmeleon, which is multiple turns, which you're just like, okay, knock out Charmeleon.
right, and when it's also like, okay, they have to play Charmeleon, but how do you find it?
Hmm.
Ultra Ball? Well,
You
you
just
can't
have
play
to,
Ultra Ball. You have to
yeah, you
draw
have to
into
like
it.
get into it. Yeah, because you're not going to be able to Pidgeot it
Right.
because you can't get Pidgeot until you rare candy, which you can't when you're item locked. So
Exactly.
just a really, really cool deck overall. And I would imagine that this deck is also really cheap. So if you're
Yep.
looking for another cheap deck to take to locals to have fun, you don't need Prime Catcher because this deck opts for Hero's Cape.
Yep.
You'll be able to play that as well in there. So just some really, really cool decks coming out of Sao Paulo. And like you said, there's no majors this weekend, I don't think.
Is
Or
Indianapolis this weekend or is it next weekend? It might be next weekend.
I think it's next weekend because I
Okay.
I remember seeing Azul's tweet. There's a really cool event, going off topic that Azul's doing. He's doing like all these like showdown events as of
Mhm.
late, like Team USA versus Team Australia or Team Latin America or whatever. He's doing one with USA versus Latin America, Grant Manley, Caleb Gettimer, Ryan Antonucci, three really
Okay.
good players, against William Azevedo, Pedro Pertusi, who just won,
Yeah.
and then Ricardo Felipe, playing a match this weekend, a show match, and it's a 3v3 best of 9 conquest. And so remember conquests, I think we've talked about it before, you showcase a bunch of decks, and when you win with the deck, you stop playing the deck.
Yes.
So that's going to be on Azul's YouTube channel, and usually they've shared the lists afterwards in some form or fashion. So I would imagine, especially in this kind of format that we're in, that we're going to see a ton of really cool decks because there's at least 9 decks. Or,
Mhm.
well, wait, best of 9. So you have to win 5. So at least 5 different decks, unique archetypes that are going to be showcased because you got to win with 5 unique archetypes. So, really, really cool in my opinion. So go check that out if you're looking for some cool decks to play in the format.
Yes. But
Mhm.
that's gonna wrap it up for us, Jake. Do you wanna sign us off?
That's going to be the end of the episode, but not the end of the Metapod podcast because we'll be back next week. As always, reminder about those NAIC dates. Remember to listen back. I don't know what the timestamp is,
It's
but
Thursday
figure
and
it out
Friday.
yourself.
Thursday night,
Thursday and
Friday morning.
Friday. Yes, make sure you go back in the episode if you didn't write down the times before to get the exact times of when that's going to drop, because especially if you want to play, you're going to have to be ready at your computer at the time that it drops. And then Sean had some recommendations in there of how you can prepare as best as possible to be able to sign up right away. But for the rest of us, thank you so much for listening. I'm Jake, that's Sean, and we'll see you next week.